Aloha maine kako, and welcome back to V93FM.com. I'm Kapo Ku, sitting in with Kamaka Brown in the Sandwich Island Network Radio, Synchro Radio. Go ahead, give it up for him. How's it? And I love that acronym. By the way, that's the reason why I'm sitting here with you guys. Now, we have a very special call-in guest, a gentleman you may know, a fellow ulu tree planter, a member of the Office of Hawaiian Affairs Board of Trustees, Hawaiian folk singer-songwriter, a member of the 60s mainland folk group, the Travelers 3, Hawaiian businessman, activist, humanist, a man who truly embraces everyone and does his best to see all sides of any issue. Someone I have much aloha for, Peter Apo. Give it up for Peter Apo!
Hey. Aloha, Peter.
Aloha, all of you.
Mahalo, Peter, for joining us.
You're welcome. My best claim to fame is that I'm still alive.
Oh, right on. That's always a plus, right?
Yeah, that's also a plus.
You've had such a vast and interesting life to date. Much to talk about and always so little time, but hey, holo mua, yeah? Peter, who are you and how has your life become what it is today?
Well, I know we don't have a lot of time. Let me make this very brief. I grew up, I was born in 1938, so you do the numbers. I'm 77 years old. I was born during a time when it was not all that cool to be a Hawaiian. And I guess we'll get into this thing of the overthrow and the Hawaiian fight for self-determination. But my parents were of a generation where the thing to do was to make sure that your kids grew up American. And that's not a value judgment. That's not saying anything bad about being American. But it meant having to abandon the language. It meant having to abandon a lot of the cultural traditions and customs of being a Hawaiian, and to totally 100% go Western schools, Western notions of how to do things. And so I grew up, I was like 35 years old after spending many years on the mainland, before I ever understood what it was to be a Hawaiian, because I was not raised in my culture. Now, there's a lot of stuff that, that I did know about being Hawaiian. I knew about Hawaiian food, but not in terms of the spirituality of being Hawaiian, what Hawaiians, the accomplishments of Hawaiians, our culture, our history, the kind of thing that other ethnic groups, I think, who come from their own countries take for granted.
But Peter, you did grow up with your father fishing and close to the land, right? Your father's Kama'aina, a child of the land. So you learned those lessons, don't you think?
Oh yeah, I learned a lot of lessons, but in Hawaii, they don't teach Hawaiian history. They taught American history,
yeah,
and what we call the missionary version of how Hawaii became a part of the United States. So the deep stuff, the political stuff, the spiritual stuff really was absent unless if the parents don't get in it. And as you know, Kapo, everything is reflected in the language.
Yep.
So when a Hawaiian or a Japanese, or it doesn't matter what culture you're from, when you don't know the language, you're not raised with the language, you're missing 90% of what it means to be whatever that ethnicity is.
So your father was part Chinese, part Hawaiian?
Chinese Hawaiian, yeah.
And your mother, pure Hawaiian, yeah?
Yeah, my mother was like 95% Hawaiian.
Did they speak to each other?
Both spoke.
Okay.
Both spoke fluent Hawaiian. I didn't even know till I was in elementary. Well, actually, intermediate school, that they actually were fluent Hawaiian speakers, because they never spoke it in the home, except for a few, common phrases that we know. It's all pao, ohana. Right. Some of those words, but never. So I was one of 4 children. I was the baby. None of us really were raised with the language, and that was a big missing thing.
And then your mother, she was an educator, and I'm sure she was a big force in you going to school, to college, probably.
Yeah, my mom was totally dedicated to education. One of the landscape when I was growing up is that Hawaiians Hawaiians dominated every negative statistic that you can think of with respect to, quality of life, dysfunctional families, transgenerational trauma. That all began, and you'll get into this at some point in 1893, when the Queen of Hawaii was imprisoned, and Hawaii, in long story short, essentially was the victim of a coup d'etat by some American businessmen, and Hawaii was a constitutional monarchy. They imprisoned the Queen and basically took over the government. So
this is all stuff that you did not grow up thinking or being aware of. When you did go off to college in Eugene, Oregon, where I was born, by the way, that's the land of my birth.
Yes.
You went to college, you started studying, you started singing in a group, the Travelers 3. This was
I was singing American folk music.
Tell us a little bit about those years, Mr. Peter Apo.
Pretty wild. It was the '60s generation. The experience of being in the band, we were very fortunate. We had great management, great agents. So, long story short, we cut four albums. These were long play albums at the time. It was even pre-cassette days, pre-CD. We were fortunate. We crisscrossed the country, maybe 50, 60 times, went to every corner and nook, largely playing little folk clubs and college concerts. The college concert was a really big deal in the 60s.
Yep. That was the venue, right?
Emerged. So now we talk about the days of Peter, Paul, and Mary, the Kingston Trio, the Byrds, John Denver, bands like that. So we were part of that movement, so to speak.
And that's
as you recall, the '60s was a movement where there was a huge cry from the college kids and people of my age, 30 and under, calling for justice, for civil rights, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's a very exciting time. So a lot of the music, the folk music, Bob Dylan is probably the iconic writer of cries for civil justice, and in his music, Blowing in the Wind, as an example.
We are speaking with Peter Apo, Hawaiian activist, songwriter, and this is where his roots are from. I mean, that's where you really formed your musically in the folk scene, right? Of that time, you, Charlie, and Dick Shirley, right?
Yes, and the band, to provide a continuum from folk music and then my returning home and getting involved as a Hawaiian activist, crying for political justice. All the years in the folk band on the mainland was spent doing what everyone else was doing, both with the music and in going on and picketing. Martin Luther King, this thing with the Kennedys and justice. People seeking justice. So when I came home in 1975, after having been gone, I was absent from 57 to 75. There was a kind of a Hawaiian Renaissance that was just emerging, where the stuff that I had learned from participating in the activism, civil activism of the folk era, came in very, very handy because Hawaiians were just beginning to reawaken, and activism, starting with of course, maybe sometime we can get into the return of the island of Kaho'olawe.
George Helm.
State of Hawaii.
Yeah.
So it was a natural transition for me, and it was a very exciting, brand new, because now I was doing something about my culture, and crying for joining the advocacy for justice, political justice, that was very, very personal to me, to my family, and to generations of Hawaiians.
And you do this work very passionately, I must say, Pete. And right now we're going to take a break, and we're going to have I think we should have a couple of samples of Peter Apo, singer-songwriter, and we'll return and we'll talk about your more about your politics here on v93fm.com. But before we go, Peter, you have a website, do you not?
I do.
Tell us about it.
It's peterapo.com. It's basically a website 360 on Hawaiian issues.
Very good. So if
anyone's interested, lots of stuff on there.
A lot of people interested. We'll be right back, and let's hear some Peter Apo on v93fm.com.
I am mountains rising high above the valley.